Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Looper, starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Bruce Willis, Emily Blunt, Paul Dano, Piper Perabo, and Jeff Daniels, directed by Rian Johnson. Now, I remember going a couple of times to this movie in theaters, and I remember being a little confused by it. So, let me see if that still remains before I get to Glass Onion. Let's get into this movie. The year is 2044 in a town in Kansas as Joe, played by Joseph Gordon Levitt, is a looper. And what is his time travel? And what is his job? Time travel is illegal because it hasn't been invented yet, but it will be in 30 years from now. So Joe's job is to take time travelers down to the ground, meaning he has to kill them while he learns French because he wants to go to France and one day, and that's during the day, as I like this guy's arc from the very beginning of this movie, as director Rian Johnson and Joseph Gordon-Levitt work absolutely great together after Brick. And here, it's just as good work, but as it was in Brick, but at night, Joe goes to the club with his friend slash partner Seth, played by Paul Dano, as he tries to get a lap dance from Susie, played by Piper Perabo, but unfortunately, she has a client who already chose her, and Joe's daily schedule is the same every single day, and I'm really enjoying myself watching this movie as I relate with Joe as a character. Seth goes to his apartment and tells Joe he's a wanted man because he didn't want his loop, but he didn't kill his loop, but instead he lets him go as he saw his face and learns about a new management called the Rainmaker, who made time traveling legal 30 years into the future. And some of the loopers come barging into his apartment and comes into the office to with Joe and takes Joe with him, to talk with his boss, Abe, played by Jeff Daniels, and I was scared for Seth while Joe is almost killed by his other looper, co-worker Zach, as this door opens. Zach shoots nowhere, and Abe talks with Joe in his office. And these scenes is a good way to introduce Abe, aka Jeff Daniels' character, as Joe tells him he wants to go to France, while Abe wants him to go to China because he's learning French. And I like Abe in this movie as I'm not a Jeff Daniels fan per se, and I think the first Dumb and Dumber and the sequel as well may have something to do with that because I always think of him as a comedic actor. I don't know what it is, but something about the guy, just even when he does dramatic work, I can't take him seriously. Suspect, drives like a fucking maniac and eventually crashes his car to the side as he dies from becoming paled skin, and Zach shoots him dead, which was an interesting choice. Joe almost gets a blowjob, but by Susie, but he tells her to leave town as he wants to give her some money and live her life with her kid. And this movie slows down as a bit as I'm 25 minutes into the movie, and I'm wondering when is the plot gonna kick in? It begins with old Joe as Joe is in the future, played by Bruce Willis, getting away and beats up on young Joe, let's call for the rest of the movie, because Bruce Willis's name is Old Joe, and I'm going to call him Young Joe. So let's go there. As he wakes up, and it's almost nighttime, and Young Joe goes to his apartment all trashed up, while Zach and other loopers try to find him and kill him, and that's when the plot kicks into gear. Young Joe gets shot as he jumps out the window and dreams about looping Old Joe the right way, and he dreams of himself in Shanghai and working for the Chinese mob for 30 years while looking like what Bruce Willis looks like now. Excuse me. As his family is killed by someone who we'll know later in the movie and gets sent into the future to finish off the past, I'll say, to this particular someone as a kid while beating up his own Joseph Gordon-Levitt self. So that's why he wants to go back to the past and kill off the kid, which is hard enough to explain how this plot is. I mean, it's complicated, sure, I'll give it that. Old Joe saves young Joe and puts him out of his way, and the way the cinematographer shoots this movie is well done. Old Joe goes to the diner and meets young Joe, and they have an intense conversation on why old Joe is in the timeline. And in this movie, And I enjoyed the hell out of this scene as while Bruce Willis says to Joseph Gordon-Levitt, "Why don't you shoot me in between your legs, little boy?" As that made me laugh even harder in the movie than it did in the trailer, because it was in the trailer, keep in mind. As it was a well shot, intensely said with the dialogue, and the way it's shot by cinematographer Steve Yedlin, I don't know if I'm saying that right, please forgive me, is tremendous. A shootout begins, and old Joe escapes, and so does young Joe as he goes into the crops and hides from the loopers until he finds Sarah, played by Emily Blunt, who will shoot hobos if they cross her farm and go after her kid Sid, as she's very threatening with a gun. That's right, as old Joe wants Sid dead because of him becoming the Rainmaker. And the acting in this is very well done, sure. And Abe breaks Zach's fingers for not bringing young Joe in, and these are good actors giving good performances. But Bruce Willis is unfortunately still not having much fun in this movie as young Joe saves Sarah from a hobo and is down and gets some water to drink band to drink and bans the kid turning in some and the kid turns in some great work as well, I'll just say that much. The next day comes and young Joe talks with Sarah and tells her about the future, which is Sid becoming the Rainmaker, and she shoots him at first, and I thought, what the fuck was she thinking of shooting someone trying to explain the future, as well as time traveling haven't been invented yet, but it will be 30 years from this world, I'll say. And she helps him out so old Joe doesn't shoot Sid, and he sticks around until Abe or old Joe come by the house to attack the future at the house, which will be later in the film, while Sid doesn't believe Sarah is his mother, or is his mother, I should say, as he talks with young Joe. And these later scenes kind of slow the movie down, as this is kind of a long movie at the 2 hours this movie is. It's like close to 2 hours. Maybe 10 minutes could have been cut out of the movie, and it would have been a stronger movie. Sarah teaches Sid some math until he bursts out with his own powers and calls her a liar and hides in a metal place. And this scene makes me think, this is the movie I wanted, with Sid having powers. Oh, and I forgot to bring this up. Old Joe believes Sid is the reason his family is killed, as a looper comes to the house and barges in looking for young Joe while hiding all over the place. And I got scared that young Joe was going to get caught while the looper is in the house, and Sid enters the room and hides himself, as well as young Joe. And I'm getting to the point where I like the movie, but it has problems during the second half with Sarah, aka the Emily Blunt character, in these scenes, as well as these scenes slow the movie down, and I wish it didn't, honestly. The looper gets out of the farm while old Joe is caught by a camera on Susie, spying on Susie, excuse me very much, and her kid, and I don't even know what happens to her at the end of the day, which did bother me a bit. And Sarah calls young Joe to kiss him and have intercourse, as she has powers of floating things, and I'm starting to think this movie isn't what I wanted by the end of the day, which is super unfortunate. The next day comes and Sarah is captured by the looper, with young Joe begging him to not kill her, nor Sid, as Sid kills the looper. Zach, I think is what it was, finds and beats up old Joe, as young Joe and Sarah get out of the house, while young Joe finds Sid in the crops all bloodied up, as Sarah is led to believe young Joe is going to kill Sid, but he doesn't, while old Joe is captured by Zach and is taken to Abe, and old Joe kills them all, I guess good riddance, and goes to young Joe and gives him his life back. And Zach tries to kill both Joes, let's say, but young Joe kills Zach by damaging his engine. And old Joe escapes to get Sid and Sarah, and Sid comes towards old Joe as he tries to kill them both, while Sid flips the car over, and old Joe continues to shoot at them and gets Sid in the face and rises up and blows everything, including old Joe and Sarah, but he stops him, and young Joe stops himself while Sarah, and he stops himself, I'm sorry, I meant Sid, While Sarah says it's okay and mommy loves you, and young Joe gets to them and Sid runs away, while Sarah blocks old Joe, and young Joe sees why he kills his family in the future, so he sacrifices himself as well as old Joe, and Sarah doesn't have to worry about the death of Sid. So Sid can have a happy future. As the climax was good, but the second half of the movie died down since it began. So let's see how I did with this movie. Let's just get into the rating. I'll give this movie a 6.7 out of 10. The movie slows down until 25 minutes into the movie as the plot kicks into gear. And this plot is complicated, sure, but I like the way the movie was shot, as the cinematographer Steve Yedlin is tremendous. The actors are tremendous in the movie, sure, and they turn in some good work, but it's the second great collaboration between director Rian Johnson and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, but Bruce Willis didn't seem to have any fun in this later, as of his later work. And this movie slows way down for the second half of it, and it became the movie I didn't necessarily want. The movie is good, but it did some things that weren't necessary, as this movie is 10 minutes too long, and part of the second half could be cut out. But otherwise, this is a recommendation for the way this turned out. The only thing is, just be prepared for a complicated plot. I will say that much. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with Knives Out. And until then, it's time to loop away.